Grazie, Alessandro, dear Cristiane, dear organizers. After this kind introduction, it would be better that I do not talk, so we will not be disappointed. In fact, after the wonderful lecture, I have the task maybe to bring you back to clinical reality. And I was asked to report about our effort and also our experience in conducting a data-driven approach in the clinical practice. So I report now on a study that is still developing, so there will not be much results to be presented, but I would like to show you, let me see if I can see my slides. I would like to show you how such a study can be realized in Switzerland, and I would like to stress this is a study on a rare condition, which makes this even more complex. Now, I'm not sure what I can do because on my screen I see yes. So Sphinx has nothing to do with Egypt. It's just the acronym for the study, which is a Swiss primary hypersomnolence and narcolepsy cohort study. So I will tell you why we have decided to run the study, and this is the background, and then I will show you the main aims, which is actually a data-driven approach to look for new biomarkers for this spectrum of disorders. I will tell you about the patients and the methods, which will illustrate the need of multiple data to solve or to address the question raised by the key question of the study. First results just illustrating the potential of the approach, and then maybe preliminary conclusions on this study and what we plan next. So we're talking about primary central disorders of hypersomnolence, and one of the disorders belonging to this spectrum is well known and well characterized and has also very good biomarkers. So this is narcolepsy with cataplexy, or as it is called in the classification, narcolepsy type 1. It is a rare disorder, and it is clinically well characterized, not so much by the presence of excessive daytime sleepiness, which is obviously a very non-specific symptom on the left inside, but actually by the second leading symptom of this condition, which is cataplexy, which is the loss of muscle tone triggered by emotions, for instance, being tickled. So it's a well-defined clinical syndrome, and it has also the fortune of having three quite, I shall say, quite sensitive and to some extent also specific biomarkers: the HLA positivity present in 95% of the patients, the presence on sleep studies of sleep onset REM periods, and also, this is a more recent discovery, the fact that if you do a spinal tap, 95% of the patient will show the absence or the reduction of the peptide hypocretin, which is a neurotransmitter. So this is not the problem. The problem is actually what we call the narcolepsy borderland. This is a group of disorder shown here in green: narcolepsy without cataplexy, idiopathic hypersomnia, hypersomnia associated with psychiatric symptoms, and insufficient sleep syndrome, which is actually sleep deprivation. Now, we believe, based on epidemiological study, that the spectrum is more common and may affect, in fact, 1 to 2% of the population. But the absence of biomarkers for these conditions that are characterized by excessive daytime sleepiness make the diagnosis of this condition difficult, and eventually also the treatment. So a group of experts from Europe have raised the question what could and should be done in the future to address this narcolepsy borderland, which is unclear. And in fact, recent studies have shown a few ways to address this question. One is to look for new biomarkers, and with Federica Sallusto, we were lucky enough a couple of years ago in this Nature paper to show that maybe one new biomarker of narcolepsy and the borderland could be the detection of autoreactive T cells in the CSF, but also in the blood of these patients. We were lucky to see that not only these T cells can be found in patients with narcolepsy type 1, but also in narcolepsy type 2. And others have shown that using a machine learning approach, you may use clinical neurophysiological data that are usually obtained in clinical practice and maybe discover new biomarkers new signatures of the narcolepsy borderland. So this is the base, the question, what is the narcolepsy borderland that actually led to the preparation of this study. And I would like now to show you how this has been done. So it took us eventually 4 years to prepare the study. So if you want to do something of that kind, it takes time. And in fact, the first investigators meeting took place in 2017. We got the Swiss National Science Foundation after a couple of years and the ethical approval even later. So this is a multi-center prospective observational cohort study. It's exploratory and it's a data-driven approach study. So this cartoon shows you in essence what we want to do with this study. We want to identify new biomarkers of different kind. I will show you the methodology. This should lead us eventually to the possibility through these discoveries of maybe understanding better also the determinants and maybe the etiology or pathophysiology of the disease. Eventually, the final goal is to improve the diagnostic of narcolepsy borderland, which disorder do belong to narcolepsy and which have nothing to do with narcolepsy. Is, in other words, the presence of excessive daytime sleepiness after sleep deprivation already a sign of a beginning narcolepsy or a predisposition to narcolepsy, or is it completely separate? And finally, finding new targets eventually opens also the possibility of having new targeting and specific causal treatment approaches. So when we have published the protocol of the study, this is the way we looked or we depicted the current situation. So you see on the left-hand side what we have. We have few markers, and we have a number of diseases, narcolepsy type 1, narcolepsy type 2, and idiopathic hypersomnia that actually overlap. This is the problem that we are facing, and what we aim with the use of new biomarkers is actually to go to the ideal situation of the second figure, where the new biomarkers should let us identify better the different syndromes and also eventually lead to a better diagnosis. So we published the protocol, and as you see already by the list of authors, this has become a quite complex study involving many different types of scientists, and I will come back to this point. Now, patients and methods. This is a rare disorder, as I've shown, and we actually made a calculation based on an inquiry through the different centers that signaled their interest. So we ended up with a number of 300 to 350 patients with suspected central disorders of hypersomnolence. We thought of starting also a small cohort of children. There is no collaboration around narcolepsy in Switzerland yet on this topic. And the inclusion criteria are obviously more specific than shown here. This is just a short sketch. Is the presence of an excessive daytime sleepiness, as some of you may have also today, or an increased sleep needs. So you could become a subject of the study depending on whether this is of known cause. Are you taking drugs? Do you have an underlying neurological disorder? Are you sleep deprived? This is already an inclusion criteria. Or do you have a overt psychiatric disorder or an overt sleep disorder such as sleep apnea? We have planned to have 50 healthy controls, and we have increased the recruitment up to 5 years, including also a follow-up. I will not go into the details, but already in the first 2 years of the study, we had to change the protocol, which is, as probably some of you know, a need sometimes. So we excluded the original idea of having apnea controls with excessive daytime sleepiness. We have decided to increase the duration of the recruitment, and eventually we had to reduce the number of patients planned from the original 500. It turned out to be a huge effort, and here I show you that we have different people involved, and I like to say that we are very happy and lucky because we have actually engaged 3 clinical PhDs in the study, and Ksenia Tsuk is actually a refugee from the Ukraine who has been supported by the SNF. So this is a study that is driven much by these young PhD students, and we have obviously study nurses. Now, the complexity of such a study is really then to get the different groups in Switzerland to work together. And those that do clinical trials know how difficult this is, not only in Switzerland, but in Switzerland as well. And eventually we have now 9 sites shown here, distributed over the entire country, that are participating. Some of these centers are focused on children recruitment and others on adults, and few, and I will come back to this also with both. And I'm happy to say that we have also Silvia Miano from Lugano joining this study. Now, this is a cartoon, and I could now speak 30 minutes about the data and the multimodal approach of the study that depicts what we would like to investigate, where we look for new biomarkers. Now, what we will do and what we are doing with this study is to phenotype this population, as everybody does in the world, according to the clinical criteria defined by the international classification, by questionnaires, and by the conventional sleep-wake study. So we check the polysomnography, we check the daytime sleepiness by vigilant test, and this is what is done in routine. What we do in addition is first to look for neuroimmunological markers. We look for the replication of the Nature paper to see if indeed in this narcolepsy borderland we find autoimmune cells that are involved, and this was suggested by few cases reported in the original paper, but needs to be confirmed. We look for HLA typing and completely new also epigenetic factors that may be, as suggested by recent observations, silencing the neurons rather than leading the neurons to being killed through an autoimmune disorder. We look for the presence of other proteins that may be involved and other peptides involved in the pathophysiology. This is still a matter of debate. In addition to the decrease of the hypocretin neurons, we look for potential changes in the microbiome, knowing that microbiome changes are seen in patients with autoimmune disorders or in patients that are suspected to have an immunomodulatory effect. And last but not least, one of the problems of sleep medicine is that we are linked and we are facing with the difficulty of having a single shot examination one night, the polysomnography, and we would like to see if we can assess sleep and wake behavior and changes over a longer time with the use of portable devices. So this is a quite complex approach. And this is in essence what Atina Tsovara, she's a mathematician with a double affiliation between our department and the Philnat faculty in Bern, and a data scientist, Julia van der Meer, who is already in the team. So we will get the results of all the studies that I've shown you, the different assessments. These will feed a neural network. The neural network integrates information from different sources, and eventually we hope at the end that the output is a diagnosis with probability information. I will not show you what we plan in terms of the long-term monitoring, but this is also planned in addition to this acute assessment. Now, to do a study with so many variables and different assessments, obviously you need to rely on experts, and this turned out to be also a demanding effort of the study. So as you see, we cannot do everything in Bern. So we have, for the genetic studies, collaboration with the University of Lausanne in Medi Tafti. Then we have, for the microbiome study, Professor McPherson. For the peptidomics, for the measurement of small peptides, there are only few groups in Europe that can do this in a reliable way. So we have a collaboration with Munich. Then we have the spectrometry CSF examination in Bern. And then finally, the neuroimmunology is linked with the ATH and the ERB in Ticino. So we started after a long preparation, after 4 years of preparation, and right after the start, we had to stop because of COVID. So this is one of the experiences that we share. And actually, this delayed completely the start. And finally, in late 2021, we were able to get some velocity in the study. And now we are recruiting 5 to 8 patients per month. And you see now that we have almost 100 patients recruited from the different sites. Now, what you see here is the delay of diagnosis, clinical diagnosis in the population that we have recruited. And you see that on average in Bern, in Barmelweit, in Lugano, And in the centers that are shown here, the delay of the diagnosis of central disorders of hypersomnolence is still around 5 years, even for participation in the study. So we deal with the problem of early diagnosis. And although we do have some patients that come to the study are included early, most of them are delayed. And this is one of the problems in the diagnosis of this condition and in general of rare diseases. Now, I will not go into too many details of the preliminary results. The idea of looking at these preliminary results is to check for the feasibility. So here we look at some new questionnaires that we are testing. The Swiss Narcolepsy score is a 5-question questionnaire that would allow clinicians to have a first orientation on the possible presence of a narcolepsy, borderland narcolepsy disorder, and Epworth is a more score is a general score for sleepiness, and we have the impression that narcolepsy with cataplexy can be well identified by both an elevated Epworth and a low number of the Swiss Narcolepsy score, which is the cutoff that is shown in previous studies. The microbiome, I will not now comment much on the preliminary results, which must be taken with some caution. As shown, as most of the studies in microbiome in neurology, unclear results. And actually, there are only 2 studies worldwide on microbiome in narcolepsy, and they have conflicting results. So we have decided to use a more sensitive method than the original amplicon sequencing approach method shown here. In terms of the genetics, I'm sorry, there is here a shift. We could show from these preliminary results on 59 patients that the selection of the patient fits with what the literature tells us. In patients with narcolepsy type 1, the HLA positivity is present in over 90% of the patient, not the case for healthy controls and the narcolepsy borderland. In this specific first analysis seems not to be linked with narcolepsy, so we'll see. Now, we are very excited, and this I cannot show you in details, about the peptidomics. So we are able to detect very small peptide in the CSF of our patients. Obviously, we need to ask them, and not all of them accept that we do a lumbar puncture. And what we have found is that many proteins are upregulated in patients with narcolepsy type 1 compared to the borderland and to healthy controls, and most of these peptides on the preliminary analysis seem to be involved with the immune system or with infection. And we found also a new fragment of the hypocretin, which may become then a target for the neuroimmunologic analysis of T cells that target the hypocretin system. We are very excited by the fact that we are able now to measure quantitatively the CSF with this mass spectrometry. Until now, worldwide, the radioimmunoassay is used. This is a semi-quantitative method. With this spectrometric approach, we are able now to differentiate the deficient condition narcolepsy type 1 from the controls, and the calibration and linearity results are quite promising. Finally, we were very anxious to see how is Fitbit and how is actigraphy being used in this patient. We are looking now at the results of the first 67 patients. So we are dealing now, just to give an idea, with 42 years of recording. And it looks like subjects, this is an ongoing result. So it's not what is in white is not because the patient did not carry the wearable, but because the study is still ongoing. In red, you see some patients do not carry the wearable, and in green, you see that some patients are quite compliant, and we have an overall compliance of 75. And we are looking how good are these portable systems, in this case Fitbit versus the original method used in sleep medicine activity versus sleep diary, in assessing sleep behavior, sleep duration, and also daytime sleepiness. So I come to the conclusion of this study. Turns out to do something like this is very tedious, and we had also, because of COVID, a difficult start. We have proven so far the feasibility. It turned out to be a great adventure to put all these young and less young people together. There is a great team spirit, I think, around this study, and eventually the challenge, but also the interest of doing such a study is that you end up working with different scientists, those working in genetics, those working in microbiome, those working in the traditional field of sleep, data scientists. And as I mentioned, we have also 3 PhD students who are actually the anima of the study, and we have some preliminary interesting results. So what are the next steps? We will start soon with the pediatric cohorts in Basel, Lugano, Zurich, and Bern. We are going to change the microbiome approach using a more sensitive method. We plan to extend the SNF in October. Unfortunately, the money is over. And because of the recruitment, I would say the limited recruitment, we are in touch with 3 international centers for narcolepsy in Holland, in Bologna, and in Germany. And we have a collaboration at the level of the European Narcolepsy Network with these 3 centers. And through the SNF and through their local funding, we hope to extend the study from a multi-center Swiss into a multinational or international study. Thank you very much.